Good morning, everybody. I'm Nicola Barrett, Chief Corporate Learning Officer at Emory Executive Education at Goizueta Business School. Thank you so much for joining us today for Business Over Breakfast. We have a panel today as we continue our series on ESG. That's environment, social, and governance. For many organizations, there is a tension between meaningful reporting and the public relations image and marketing messages that we want to project. Today, we're going to explore how we evaluate organizational reporting, and importantly, how do we make that ESG reporting meaningful, measurable, and relevant. Our conversation will focus on the standards and metrics developed by the Value Reporting Foundation and explore the methods used by UPS in their sustainability initiatives and reporting, and the goals they're pursuing, and looking at the tools they're using to track and report in a more transparent way. It's my pleasure to welcome back Usha Rackliffe to lead this morning's session. Usha serves as the Associate Professor in the practice of accounting, and she has a very strong interest in ESG measurement and reporting standards. Usha has invited two industry experts to join her today, Shira Goldmann from the Value Reporting Foundation and Andria Smith from UPS's Office of Sustainability. And altogether, they're going to dive into why measures and reporting matter. So just let me introduce Shira first. Shira Goldmann is the Membership and Engagement Associate at the Value Reporting Foundation, which was formerly known as the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. She manages all the educational events focused on SASB standards, integration, and reporting for the 260 organizational members of the Alliance. And she also supports the work of the Investor Advisory Group, which is an investor body with over 51 trillion in assets under management that advocates for standards across the market. And Shira joins us from New York City. Andria Smith is the Sustainability Program Lead for UPS, which is a worldwide, we all know this, the brown trucks come up, roll up to my front door quite often. They are a worldwide leader in supply chain and logistics solutions. Andria manages environmental inventories, voluntary sustainability reporting, and development of UPS's long-term sustainability strategy. Importantly, she ensures UPS accurately captures and reports on the metrics associated with their environmental responsibility initiatives. And Andria joins us from Atlanta. Suffice to say, our guests are immersed in the nuances of ESG measures and reporting on a daily basis, thankfully, and we're very grateful to have them with us today. So Shira and Andria are going to spend a few minutes sharing their insights and a brief dialogue with Usha, and then we'll transition to open Q&A. So as always, please put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get them answered on this session. And at the end of today's webinar, there will be a short survey to capture one or two of your key takeaways. And this is really critical for us. We really appreciate your feedback and want to make sure that what we are doing and what we're delivering in these webinars is of value to everybody on the session. So over to you, Usha, and looking forward to an interesting morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Good morning, everybody. So delighted to be here on this, the 50th year of the McMuffin. So just a random fact, in case you didn't know it, this is what we're here for. Anyway, you probably heard the saying, what gets measured gets done, what gets measured and fed back gets done well. So today we're not just talking about doing things well, we're talking about excellence in reporting for sustainability. And this is a cause we all care about. It's near and dear to all of our hearts, because after all, this is about taking extraordinary care to preserve and protect the planet and our people. So our focus today is on how companies can tell their ESG story with meaning, with relevance, with context, and of course, with success. So first, I'm going to start with Shira and then move on to Andria. So first of all, Shira, we know a lot of companies do ESG reporting, and we know this is very important. However, What can you say about the value that it adds? Now, I know the SASB is now called the Value Reporting Foundation, so perhaps you can talk a little bit about the value added to all the stakeholders from sustainability reporting.
Absolutely. Thank you, Usha, and thank you for having me to speak today. Let me just share my screen and we can get into those great questions. Does that look okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as you said, you're saying on management, I like to say you can't measure what you can't manage, and you can't compete if you can't compare. So just to take a quick look at why standards are important, here's an example of about 50 different ways a company might report on employee health and safety. Now, obviously, they're all speaking tremendously different languages, and it's really quite hard to tell how all of these reporting metrics stack up against each other. Nothing's normalized, it's not comparable. And in a world where we are doing effective sustainability disclosures, investors would be able to make better decisions on the same universe of information, as well as monitor change over time at a company. And companies have a better tools and disclosures to compare themselves against their peers, look at their own year-over-year data, and just simply be contributing to a more effective set of data overall. And so to answer your question about the Value Reporting Foundation and the SASB standards, just this last June, the Value Reporting Foundation was created from two of the many sustainability standards and framework organizations in the field. So those two are the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, SASB, and the International Integrated Reporting Council, the IIRC. Now, these two specifically came together because they're both targeted at an investor audience. There are other standards and frameworks in the field that speak more clearly to different audiences. The goal of the merger was to simplify the corporate reporting landscape. Traditionally, it's been quite a busy field. And just at the beginning of the month, we had an even newer announcement. So you might have heard at the climate conference at COP26, a really tremendous announcement from the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation, the IFRS Foundation. Now, this is an organization that oversees accounting standards, traditional financial accounting, in about 140 international jurisdictions. And they had issued a public comment on should they get into sustainability accounting. Now, the answer that came back to that was a resounding yes. And they also heard that folks were not interested in duplicating existing efforts in the field. So that being said, they announced that they are now creating the International Sustainability Standards Board. I know it's a lot of acronyms. Hopefully this one becomes really quite important in the next year. So next June, we will see the creation of that Sustainability Standards Board, and the Value Reporting Foundation is actually merging into that. So that's just a bit of overview on the very quickly changing field. In the interim between now and when the ultimate sustainability standards get published from the International Sustainability Standards Board, there's strong recommendation to continue or begin reporting with the SASB standards. And so just to take a more in-depth look at the SASB standards as one of many tools for sustainability disclosure, the SASB standards provide investors specifically as our target audience with comparable information on the sustainability data relevant to financial performance and enterprise value from a company. There are 6 keywords to remember when it comes to the SASB standards. Financially material, we're really only asking companies to report on the relevant information to their universe. Decision useful, we want this information to be useful specifically to the investor audience in their decision making. Cost effective, we know reporting can be quite a heavy burden for companies, and we want to minimize that load, asking them only to report on information specifically relevant to their business operations. Industry specific, we feel strongly that sustainability information is highly differentiated from industry to industry. And that's why there's actually 77 SASB standards for 77 different industries, so that companies are reporting specifically on what's important to them. Finally, evidence-based and market-informed. This is just to say that the standards were created by the market for the market with several years of rigorous research going into them. Usha, I think that answers your first few questions.
Okay, good, perfect. Now, of all of the standards, and all the organizations you just mentioned, I think what makes the Value Reporting Foundation, the SASB standards, I think so unique and special and awesome is that it does differentiate, like you said, across industry. So maybe it is you can give us like a setup of how this big picture looks like and what the sectors are, and maybe a look-see at how you structure the standards.
Yes, absolutely. Just before I get into that, one more slide on the investor audience, as I mentioned. So actually, we hit quite a milestone recently that more than half of the S&P 1200 is now reporting with the SASB standards, and that was driven in large part by investor momentum, asking companies specifically to report with the SASB standards. You might have caught at the beginning of last year the CEOs of BlackRock and State Street issuing really strong statements of encouragement, just shy of a firm request for their portfolio companies to be reporting with the standards. Investors are the target audience because they're making these big capital markets decisions with this information, and up until recently, their universe of data was simply lacking in quite a lot of issues, very material to a company's business. And we hope that the full adoption of sustainability reporting brings financial accounting into sort of modern market infrastructure, giving investors that full picture of data. Now, to answer your question, here is a sort of rundown of all 77 SASB industries. As you can see, they're grouped into 11 sectors, and we group the industries by sustainability similarities. So you'll find within a sector, there is quite a lot of overlap in sustainability issues, but quite a lot of differentiation as well. Here's a bit of breakdown on how we build a SASB standard. So we start with our 11 sectors and we move down to our 77 industries. We think about ESG actually as more than just ESG. We have 5 sustainability dimensions we look at, and these are environment, social capital, human capital, business model and innovation, and leadership and governance. Issues. So there are 26 categories that manifest across the standards. And then finally, looking down at the disclosure topics and metrics, the disclosure topics are the full catalog of things that we would ask companies to be reporting on, and the metrics just further elaborating how exactly we want you to report. So the average standard has about 6 disclosure topics and 13 metrics. And just taking a closer look at the anatomy of the standard, you can see starting in the far left, we have the topic. So like I said, what are we reporting? Looking at the right, accounting metric, how are we reporting that information? Is it quantitative or qualitative? How many disclosure points are we asking for? And then if you take a look at the sort of e-paper just ahead of it, each standard also comes with activity metrics. So these are data points meant to normalize data across an industry. So if we're looking at healthcare, perhaps it's how many hospital beds do you have, just to give the audience a sense of your total business operations.
Now that you've seen the big picture of what the standards look like across industries and sectors, maybe it is you could drill down into one of them to kind of say, here's what this looks like for a particular industry, maybe a company, and also how can companies implement these standards?
You bet. So today I thought that we could take a closer look at the biotechnology and pharmaceuticals industry. And now this slide is here to show just how the extent to which the sustainability issues within an industry differentiates itself. So looking at the social capital sustainability dimension for this, for the healthcare sector, I've got biotechnology on the left and healthcare delivery on the right, both within the healthcare sector. Now we see their general issue category, and this is one of those 26 categories, is both selling practices and product labeling. So that's the category we're in. But if we take it one step further, For biotechnology and pharmaceuticals, the most material issue in the standard is ethical marketing. And for healthcare delivery, it's pricing and billing transparency. So this is just to say, we can be talking about the same category, but these key differentiators are making the reporting all the more relevant to a company's business operations. Now, here's a look at what goes into the biotech and pharma standard. It's actually a bigger standard than average. This one has 9 topics and 23 metrics. But that brings me to an important point that if not everything within a SASB standard is relevant to your business, we would encourage you to omit it and to explain why. That's very important to say this data isn't relevant, or we don't collect this data at the time. Maybe we're planning on collecting it next year. And then conversely, if there is a material issue from a different industry standard you feel is very relevant to your business operations, we would encourage you to add that in. So taking a mix and match approach. Here you can see that there's 4 of the 5 sustainability dimensions represented in the standard. The one that's missing is environment, and that's not to say that environment isn't important within the standard. It is certainly manifesting itself through these existing sustainability dimensions. We think that climate change and human capital are 2 specifically overarching sustainability topics that might be more industry agnostic than industry specific. So there are some current research projects going into, is there a universal way to report on those very hot topics? For the time being in this industry, for example, climate change is certainly manifesting in that supply chain management topic. And to take a look at a current reporter in this industry, Johnson & Johnson has been reporting for several years within biotechnology and pharmaceuticals and has been augmenting their SASB standards report with the medical equipment and supplies standard, as well as household and personal care products. So they said one standard doesn't fully represent the scope of our work. Let's add in a few others to paint the full picture. And you can also see in the SASB metric, the last one on the right, they have omitted some information and they do explain it elsewhere. So this is a look at how the information would truly manifest in a report. Oftentimes we see hyperlinks out to external sources of data. Perhaps it's the corporate social responsibility report, the 10K, or a policy on a certain issue. But you can see all current SASB standards reporters available on our website. You can see their year-over-year reports and filter by industry or sector, which is really quite helpful as you think about how your peers are reporting.
I think this is really good because now you have comparable indicators that you can look at and assess companies within a sector, comparing them with the benchmark companies and stuff like that. So I think that's really, really good. So I have two follow-up questions. Have you heard from companies about any challenges in producing these reports? And also, have you seen any examples of great reporting?
Absolutely. So of course, there are challenges in reporting this information. It's new and it can be quite a lot. We know that part of the reason why we're simplifying the field through the International Sustainability Standards Board is because it's been a bit hectic to date. There are a lot of players. So some key challenges listed on the slide: lack of resources and survey fatigue, especially for small and medium enterprises that might not have a full reporting staff yet. It can be quite a heavy load. This plays into data collection accuracy, setting up those internal processes to be collecting the right information, identifying the relevant standard. This speaks not only to finding your correct SASB standard, but also making sure that you're reporting to the right audience with the right tools. Finally, aligning with the metrics. This is since we've been speaking so many languages in the last several years, perhaps you're collecting data with one metric and we're asking you to collect it with a different metric. So aligning with this common language. Lastly, lack of clarity on use of data. What are your audiences doing with this data? Why do they want it? What decisions are they making with it? And how are they going about that? And to speak to that a little bit, we do have a series of investor case studies on the SASB standards website highlighting how exactly several investors are using this data. Now, I don't want to leave you without some staff picks. So these are some really, really great examples of SASB standards reports. I'll just call out a few of them and why they're great. So State Street report, this not only encompasses SASB standards, but they reference a lot of other key standards and frameworks in the field, and notably explain why they've included each standard and framework. Tech Resources does a great job at explaining their modifications and omissions, as we recommend, just to say, why have you made that decision? Sherwin-Williams has quite exemplary hyperlinks to their CSR report. They don't take you on a treasure hunt to find the data. It's quite easily accessible. And finally, Wynn Resorts, the data is broken down by geographies, and it's a good example of a multi-industry reporter. As I said, you can find all SASB standards reports on our website.
Thank you, Shira. Thank you so much. So now that we know about the standards, we're now going to switch to the reporting itself. And we know so many of our S&P 500 companies produce sustainability reports. And today we want to highlight one of these, our very own UPS, which everybody knows is a leading global logistics and shipping company, and they rank 35 in the Forbes 500 list. So we're really proud that they're also, based right here in Atlanta. So we're excited to speak with Andria Smith and talk about sustainability reporting there. So Andria, maybe it is you can start with what ESG means to a company like UPS. What standards do you follow, and maybe the goals and metrics upon which you would tell your ESG story?
Absolutely. Usha and team, thank you so much for inviting me on behalf of UPS to speak about our reporting journey and our ESG initiatives. I am going to share a few slides to help guide the conversation. So how does that look?
Yes, very good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So when it comes to ESG, we want to make sure that all of our stakeholders understand that sustainability, so there's sustainability in our team's title, but sustainability is more than just the E. It's about the S and the G. So not only is it important that UPS operate in a manner that reduces our environmental impact, but it's also important that we keep our people in mind. So our people are our employees, but also the people in the communities in which we operate. It's the people across the global community, and ensuring that we are doing our best to strengthen and make communities more resilient. And then the governance aspect, ensuring that we are doing things with integrity. And then I really like this diagram because it shows the overlap and how E, S, and G aren't always distinctive. Oftentimes they overlap in that there are environmental justice issues that can help uplift a people as well. So E, S, and G is very important to UPS as an operational strategy, just to ensure that we are doing our best to maintain communities and the environment.
I like how you've laid it out like that across ESG, and you're going to talk about the standards as well as the goals that you have under all of these, right? Perfect.
Absolutely, yes. So with that, when it comes to reporting, Shira spoke to the meaningfulness of data and ensuring that you are meeting your audience where they are and speaking to their needs. So with that, UPS produces 3 sustainability reports. We do our SASB report, which Shira just spoke to. We also do the GRI, which is the Global Reporting Initiative, as well as the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, a TCFD report. And that's just because we see a different niche within each of those reports for our different stakeholders. We have been publishing a GRI since 2003. So a very lengthy history of publishing reports. This year was our second SASB and our first TCFD report. So just looks at the evolution of the reporting standards and frameworks, and then ensuring that we are comprehensive. UPS is a large organization, so we are ensuring that we are reporting across the totality of our organization. And then we feel it's critical that our report is verified by a third party. So our GRI, our SASB, specifically our greenhouse gas inventory, so the emissions reporting is audited by Deloitte. And then we're focused. Again, we're producing these reports that align with the different stakeholder priorities. So what's in our reports? It covers the E, the S, and the G. So we had an announcement earlier this year with a new set of environmental and social goals, which I'll get into in a couple of slides here. What I really want to focus on are some of our governance achievements for the past year. We have a new CEO, Carol Tomei, who is awesome, outstanding. If you haven't seen her speak, catch her on YouTube, LinkedIn videos. She's awesome. But she brought in a charge to make our board more diverse. So now we are 31% ethnically diverse board membership, 46% women on our board, ensuring that we are, again, disclosing to reports that are for the appropriate audience. So we added the TCFD report. And then another key change that was made under Carol's tenure is elevating the role of Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer and Chief Sustainability Officer to the C-suite, to our executive leadership team, so that those two positions are direct reports of the CEO. And I think that just shows the importance of both of these areas to UPS.
Now I see that you have, goals across all of these. And I love what you're coming up with on the next slide, which is, it's one thing to say we have a goal of achieving or getting to a place by 2040 or 2050, but how are you doing incrementally each year, the performance each year, like a progress report? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've included here is an example of our SASB standards table. Hopefully it looks familiar from Shira's presentation. And that what you see here is, you notice that we report the SASB topic on the far left, so that's greenhouse gas emissions. And then we narrow that down to specific codes. And this is the accounting metric. There are activity metrics further down the report. But I've given you an example here of quantitative and qualitative data. So we start this table by reporting the scope of our emissions, so our total emissions reporting for the 2020 period. Then we get into a qualitative explanation of the context around that number. So SASB gives you a great opportunity to provide that context. You'll also notice that there are external links. So if the reader wants to learn a little more, in that top disclosure, we've directed them to our GRI. In that second disclosure, you can see the link there towards the bottom where we've directed them to a governance section on our website.
So this is just an excerpt, right? So you've got a lot
Correct.
more and a lot more depth on your actual sustainability report, correct? This is what I'm recalling. Now, a lot of companies talk about carbon neutrality. This is a really big buzzword for companies everywhere. But I would think this would be particularly challenging for a logistics and shipping company, especially because you must have a huge fleet in your last mile delivery, right? So talk a little bit about, how do you operationalize like a net zero carbon goal?
Absolutely. So in that goal announcement that we made earlier this year, we announced the goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And that's our long-term goal. So we really have short-term and medium-term goals as to how we plan to get there. In the short term, a lot of it's going to be in renewable energy for our facilities. So think rooftop solar. I think the purchase of renewable energy, so purchasing energy from a cleaner grid. And then we look to not only our facilities, but our fleet. So how do we make our fleet more sustainable? And that 2025 goal is using 40% alternative fuel. So that's fuel that moves away from your traditional fossil gas and diesel. And then midterm, we start bringing the airline into it. UPS has, I think, the 8th or 9th largest airline. So now by 2035, really looking into how we can start to fuel our planes with a sustainable fuel source. And then also looking to increase the use of our renewables in facilities to 100%. So those are really the levers that we plan to pull. The output of that, kind of how we measure that milepost, is a 50% reduction in carbon per package by 2035. So that's kind of simple math. Going from 2020 to 2050, it's a 30-year time frame. 15 years in, we should be at about 50% reduction. A key part of the fleet strategy will be electric vehicles, but understanding that that's not a silver bullet solution. So we do plan on having significant investments in electric vehicles and have on pre-order a commitment to purchase up to 10,000 Arrival electric vehicles. Arrival is an EV manufacturer out of the UK. So definitely investing in electric vehicles, but also looking at hydrogen, also looking at a natural gas vehicle that is fueled with renewable natural gas. So just a host of solutions for that sustainable fleet. As an engineering company at our core, we also look to efficiencies to gain that. So how do we use less fuel to begin with? And those efficiencies really start at the network level, where we have a bird's eye view, an eagle eye view of the network, and can efficiently route things within the network and can balance volume spikes that we may see during the peak time as we move into the time between Thanksgiving and the holidays. And then really going down to the operations and ensuring that the movement of packages within an operation is as efficient as possible. Routing, UPS has a awesome routing software called Orion that saves annually 100 million miles, 10 million gallons of fuel, which equates to 100,000 metric tons of CO2 just by better routing and ensuring that our routing is as efficient as possible. And then just an eye on these electric vehicles, because it really is an awesome space for innovation. Here are some of the vehicles that we will have in the fleet. We have the upper left is that Arrival vehicle that I spoke to earlier. The upper right is the electric Tesla. So that's an electric tractor trailer. So those larger vehicles. And then we have the E-Quad, which is an electrically assisted quad cycle. So UPS is very big in the area of cycle logistics. We started as a bicycle delivery company. We've kind of gone back to the bike because it offers great sustainability benefits. It's a zero tailpipe emission solution. So that is an E-Quad there. So just some of the innovations that we have within the fleet for support of that carbon neutrality goal.
Andrea, you talked about the efficiency and your excellent routing system and software, right? I remember reading that UPS tries to minimize the use of left turns. Is that true? I mean, I do that all the time, but is that something that is actually true?
That is absolutely true. We do try to minimize. It's not no left turns, because that may not be the most efficient routing, but minimize left turns for a few reasons. One, you're not idling, waiting for that oncoming traffic to pass by. So it saves on gas, which reduces emissions, but also it's safer. You're not turning into that incoming traffic. So yeah, minimizing left turns is very big within that
Risk
routing,
Orion, right? So
platform.
important. The other thing, just looking at what you have, you're an engineer by profession, correct?
Yes.
And I'm looking at all of these metrics that you have. It must be really hard. It must be really hard to capture that kind of data, is it not?
It is. So just to speak to some of the challenges of reporting, and Shira did a great job of outlining it. I'm going to go back to my notes that I was taking from her. With that, we spoke to the challenge of resources. UPS's corporate sustainability team is a small team. We look to stakeholders across the organization to assist us with that collection of data. There was a slide in the earlier presentation on health and safety statistics. My team doesn't hold ownership to the systems that our health and safety numbers come to. So I look to my health and safety partners to give me that data. So if I were to recommend a best practice, it's really working and staying close to your subject matter experts. They are going to give you the data with that, and they help drive the deadlines and the timelines. If they're delayed in reporting, that could delay you. So staying close to that subject matter experts and ensuring that they understand what they're supposed to be reporting. The sustainability team is the host or the owner of the knowledge of the frameworks. So we have to communicate that knowledge to each and every subject matter expert so that we are reporting the proper data for the proper audience and ensuring that it is accurate. Yes, so just the project management of resources is a significant challenge within the reporting area.
I can imagine, especially for such a huge enterprise such as your company, right? But
Yeah.
beyond carbon neutrality and the environmental issues that you talked about, I'm struck by one of the overarching goals you had on one of your previous slides, which is to positively impact 1 billion lives by 2040. So how will you get there?
Yes. So at the end of the day, it's all about our people. Safety is a core value for UPS. So it's about, again, our people as UPS employees, but also the communities in which we engage. So through the, under the guidance of the UPS Foundation, we've set this positively impact 1 billion lives by 2040. And that involves really just continuing the great work that the foundation has done by targeting donations to underserved communities. So you see that top goal is a 25% charitable donations specifically targeted to marginalized communities. And then ensuring diversity within our management staff. We see there 28% women in full-time globally, while maintaining 35% ethnically diverse company management. So it speaks to our governance achievements that we have achieved earlier. How do we maintain gender and ethnic diversity throughout our management ranks? And then ensuring that we are out there in the community, engaging, volunteering. I participated in a volunteer event earlier this week in a marginalized community. And then 2, planting trees as a way to we understand we're a transportation industry, and emissions is a materially sustainable topic. So planting trees to not only sequester that carbon, but to also bring the health benefits that trees bring to communities by having that green space, by cleaning the air, by offering a place to just kind of unwind. There are studies out there that people think better, clearer when they have access to green space. So ensuring that we are engaging in our communities in multiple ways, but those are just some of the levers that we will pull to get to that 1 billion lives by 2040.
I love it. I'm impressed. I'm inspired, just as I'm sure all of our members of our audience are as well. So maybe we can open it up for any questions. We also have, a lot of green space here at Emory, which is so amazing, isn't it? Especially now we could be outdoors and do stuff, right? Any questions from anyone? So while we're waiting, maybe it is, I can go back to Shira and ask a question. So we have the E, S, and the G, the 3 different components that make up, our ESG framework. Are you seeing more traction, more development, more momentum on one of these, or which of these is kind of like there's more pressure to do more or more evolving kind of a field?
I see the most evolution in E and S. Not to say that governance is not changing. I think we are seeing strong encouragement of boards to educate themselves on ESG, and that would fall into governance. But with the E and the S, the events of this last year and a half with the pandemic, the supply chain disruptions, employee health and safety coming to the forefront, I think we've all collectively realized that information we deem to be ESG information is just as relevant to a company's enterprise value as traditional financial accounting information. It is making all the difference in bottom line, in company deliverables, et cetera. So the E, thinking about supply chain, the S, thinking about employee health and safety, have really risen to quite a degree of prominence as we realize they're integral to the success of a company.
All right, I see a few more questions in the chat. First from Steve Kennedy. Hi, Steve. Good morning, Andrea. This one's for you. This is about measurement of global impact. You know, as a complement to what y'all are doing at UPS, right? So the question says, for example, how would UPS's achievement contribute to the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals? Y'all must have had some conversations about this, right? I'm assuming.
We have, and there are several of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, that the efforts of the foundation align with. To include, there's the clean water. Forgive me, I don't know them off the top of my head. But there's also the climate. There's a equality SDG. So there are several SDGs that our efforts align with, and the intent is to stay focused in the areas in which we can make an impact. So that doesn't just hold true for our environmental impact, but our social impact as well.
I see another question from Abe, and this says, in economically challenged communities, what economic development programs are offered by UPS? Remember, you said you volunteered in one of these as well. Yeah, so what kind of programs do you have?
Yeah, so as far as engagement activities that we have in this community, the activity that I participated in was a mentoring program where we stay with a cluster of schools. So the elementary school that feeds the middle school, that feeds the high school, we offer mentoring at each of those levels where we go and engage with young people. We also offer employment opportunities. So if anyone is looking for part-time work during this seasonal period, UPS is a great place to work because many of our part-time employees who work during this peak season go on to have full-time jobs or get hired on full-time with UPS. So there's offering jobs in communities. And a great thing was a center that was built here in Atlanta recently in working with MARTA to ensure that there is a bus stop there at campus to provide public transportation to their place of employment. So just continuing activities such as that.
Make it easy, make it accessible, right? Question from Gary Bomzer. And Gary says, this is for Shira, does a value reporting foundation work with nonprofits? Do you work with nonprofits?
Yes, we do. So there's actually an industry standard on nonprofits specifically, as you won't find surprising. It has quite low adoption because nonprofits don't necessarily have the same resources and data collection processes in place to be disclosing their sustainability progress. But we do hope to see an uptick of larger, more institutionalized nonprofits reporting on their ESG metrics. And we do have many of the standards and framework organizations in the field are nonprofits ourselves. And so we're part of quite a large network of nonprofit organizations pushing these changes forward in the space.
Question then from Matthew Mullins. Hi, Matthew, good morning. And he says, history shows that there's typically an evolution. First, you start with self-reporting, and then it moves on to mandatory, then it becomes regulatory, and all of these kind of things. And so he says, is that what the long-term vision is? Is that what it is, or what is it that it's going to be to still continue to have, sort of a free market for companies to be able to do what they're good at and to still maximize what they do for their stakeholders?
Sure. Thanks, Matthew, for the question. And I saw Olga had a question in the chat as well that I am going to answer in the same go. So to go back to Olga's question, she noticed that 344 of the 500 companies in the S&P 500 are reporting with the standards. And that did not happen overnight. That happened because our investor supporters did a lot of very targeted advocacy and outreach to these companies to say, this is the forefront of reporting. This is what we want to see our investments doing in their disclosures. And so that was years and years of engagement, of encouragement directly from us and our partners to say, this isn't regulated, but it's strongly encouraged. Now, the creation of the International Sustainability Standards Board will not in and of itself affect policy and regulation. This group will be sort of a quasi-regulatory body. It does not have policy power, so to speak. So once they've developed their set of sustainability standards, it will be up to jurisdictions themselves to opt into them, just as they have opted into the financial reporting standards. And as you might know, the US has not opted into that global set of accounting standards. We've opted to go our own way, but quite a large majority of the global jurisdictions do report to those same financial accounting standards. Now, the end goal is certainly to get sustainability reporting adopted globally, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. It is one thing to encourage it. It's another thing to regulate it. And the picture these days of sustainability reporting is that it's really not different to the value being portrayed by traditional financial reporting. The message today is that this is information just as important as regulated financial disclosures. This is information contributing to that full picture of value creation, and it's just as important. So I would expect regulation coming down the line at some point. Perhaps the US will be a little bit slower if the current indications from the SEC continue as they are. It seems that the states are looking at encouraging or adopting some sort of climate disclosures before doing anything as heavy a lift as industry-specific ESG disclosures. That being said, Europe and the UK is moving, the EU and the UK are moving a bit faster than we are. And I would expect more regulation coming down from them within the next few years.
Andrea, question for you, right? So this one says, let's say I'm a manager or director level in UPS. How do you drive this down to the operational level? Now, is this part of the annual performance evaluation? I know you look at, KPIs and stuff like that, but how do you get it down to so that everybody is kind of part of this bigger idea?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. And I also see your comment, Abe. Kind of two different answers to the question. So as far as operational level performance metrics, those are set with your manager so that they are reasonable and relevant to your particular area. But as far as driving sustainability down to the operational level, we really look to sustainability champions. So we look to those people who have a heart for the E, the S, and the G to be our voice on the floor. We sit in the corporate office, we're not there in operations. We look to the employee engagement group called Sustainability Trailblazers, UPS Sustainability Trailblazers, to be that champion to engage and operationalize things there at the local level.
Now, I see a question from Ethan. Hi, Ethan. Good morning. It's from my CFO days. This is what we used to call a say-do index. What do you say you're doing, and what do you actually do, right? So Ethan points out that there are some companies out there that say that they're all about sustainability and ESG and all of that, but yet some of their actions may not be in sync with the grander goal and the grander objective. So, I think the question is, how will a reporting standard help with trying to, I guess, should I say, keep people honest?
I can jump in from the corporate perspective, if then Shira, you want to go. So I think that's where the auditing and third-party verification come in to ensure that it's not just UPS's word that you are reading in our sustainability reports, that information, that data, that qualitative, quantitative data has been third-party checked by a outside party. So I think that helps with the greenwashing. But Shira, excited to hear what you have to say.
Sure. And before I dive into the question, I also want to commend Andria and the UPS sustainability reporting. It's quite exemplary. I think the fact that you are using different standards and frameworks to target different audiences. I saw on your website that your SASB standards report comes with a separate index data table for investor use is a really strong best practice. So everyone should check out their sustainability reporting. To answer
I will
the
also say,
question,
I've noted the staff picks from your presentation, so we'll also be looking at those to benchmark to further improve our reports, but thank you.
wonderful. To get to the question, what jogged to mind to shout out the UPS report is auditing is also a really top of the line practice, not accessible to everyone yet, and certainly not required to report with the SASB standards. The information doesn't have to be audited, but our sort of way of viewing the landscape is that if companies are disclosing this information, investors can make better decisions. So the Value Reporting Foundation will never give a specific value rating to a report. We won't do anything actionable with the information disclosed. We are a neutral third-party standard setter, so we don't get our hands involved in next steps after the information is out there. We're here to support the disclosure of the information. We do hope, and it is our mission, that investors then take that wide data set and bring the capital markets forward in a more sustainable direction. It's really quite a systems change approach, assuming that with more information, investors are making better long-term decisions. So we're really transferring the power over to the investor body and saying, here's all the information. We imagine that with this greater data set, the markets will be moving in a more sustainable direction.
And so since we talked about, this is expensive and this is, it can place an extraordinary burden on companies to do all of this reporting, question from Pratibha. And she says, since you mentioned responded burden in reporting, do you offer consultancy service to help companies streamline this process? At UPS, do you use consultants at the value reporting? Do y'all provide any consulting services? I think we need to make it quick. I'm at 9:52 already. We'd like a quick answer.
Sure, quick answer. The Big Four accounting firms, as well as many small boutique consultancies, have been long-term supporters of the SASB standards. They're involved with our membership. And I think for several years have seen it coming down the line that this will be a strong business opportunity for them as sustainability information enters the world of traditional financial accounting. It will need to be audited and companies will need support in procuring the information. So I think that plenty of these organizations are quite ready to help with that.
Absolutely. And Deloitte, you said, does the audit for UPS, right, Andrea?
Yes.
Yes. Right.
And we also use additional external consultants to assist.
But of course, sometimes we need specialized help, don't we? Question from Richard. Let's make it really quick, Andrea, okay? Does UPS participate in any programs to provide access to capital for minority businesses?
Yes, we do. So there are, programs throughout the year. One that comes to mind is programs throughout the year to help minority businesses. But one that comes to mind is an opportunity to engage and become a franchise owner for the UPS stores. So the UPS stores are franchises. So we were working with minorities to work through the application process and to offer some incentives there.
Also, I thought I saw a question from Ryan and then it went away, but that's all right. So then a question from Josh Rodriguez, and he says the US military, obviously they have, a ton of ships and vehicles and aircrafts and all of that. Is there anything that they can be more sustainable as, the US military and government entities? I know, Shira, you mentioned nonprofits, but is there anything for government on that scale that could potentially help them?
This is not necessarily our area of expertise. So again, I'd go back to the understanding that with more information available in the market, we see market priorities arise, we see capital flowing in directions that will enable a further sustainability transition for organizations across the board. And
best practices obviously translate from industry to government anyway, right? So Julie Friedberg asked a question about net zero emissions, right? So is there anything in the SASB standards that says what is net zero, right? And is there a way to hold companies to a consistent meaning?
Sure. So net zero comes up, not specifically as net zero in the SASB standards, but plenty of industry standards ask companies to report on their emissions. This is one of the areas that we are exploring if an industry agnostic climate disclosure expectation could be useful. To date, all of our disclosures are industry specific, but this is obviously something that spans all industries. And so over at the SASB standards, we are exploring what it would look like to produce that industry agnostic climate standard. And I'd also recommend checking out a few other standards and framework organizations that are more specifically tailored to climate and carbon disclosures. For example, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, which is a project of the Carbon Disclosure Project, and the Task Force on Climate Disclosure, TCFD. Those are much more specifically tailored to climate reporting.
I'm going to do last question, maybe. I think last one for each of you, like the quickest of answers. Miss Andrea, question for you. Does UPS have any plans to invest in green bonds or utilize carbon credits, like carbon offsets, right? We hear a lot about that from transportation companies.
Yeah, so short answer, we are currently pursuing options in support of that carbon neutrality goal by 2050. So options are on the table.
Perfect. Thank you. Shira, last question for you. Our investors seem to care about investing in ESG funds. What are you seeing about use of these standards by investment banks, for example?
Sure. So the standards usage will be very deep into the back end. It won't necessarily be translated to individualized investors within these ESG funds, but the idea is that investment and analysts all across the board are utilizing these reporting frameworks to better inform their decisions. So I know a lot of them have very specific in-house processes. They leverage data that they collect themselves straight from reports, as well as data from ratings and ranking agencies to simply create a more sustainable and long-term investment model in-house that will translate into their portfolios.
So thank you, Shira, and thank you, Andrea. You've been amazing. And I think for the audience, obviously, whether you are, a company that has 85 billion in revenues like UPS, or just a person who cares about, the people and the planet, there's a lot we can all do to make the world a more sustainable, place for future generations. So thank you so much. So Pam, back to you.
Yes, and thank you all three, Usha, for great facilitation, and Shira and Andrea for sharing your expertise with us this morning. And thanks to our participants, such great questions as always. So we are so thankful for you and your engagement as we look at this incredibly important topic for our planet, frankly. So before we go today, I'd love to share a few things that are coming up for us at Emory Executive Education. And importantly, we hope you'll continue to join us for our continuation of our ESG series. So coming up next month on December the 2nd, building an eco-friendly brand. We will have a faculty host, Saloni Vistani. And with us, we'll have Pete Davis from Greenprint, Kim Burns from Georgia Pacific, and Ashley Grice of Bright House. So I hope you'll join us for that. And then concluding our 2021 programming and of course our ESG series, Brian Goebel of the Business School, who is one of the leaders in our Business and Society Institute, will explore conscious capitalism, about what's the big story around B Corps and why are they on the rise. So we hope that you will join us for that. We have a few short courses that are coming up in the coming months that we hope that you'll join us for. So one is finance and accounting for non-financial managers and executive decision making. We have a new launch of a series of courses that can come together for a certificate, our growth marketing certificate. You also can qualify for university credits, graduate credits for those courses. So we hope that you will check us out at Emory Executive Education on the web. And as we've mentioned in some of our previous Business Over Breakfast sessions, we have two really important programs that we feel, especially in today's environment, can help elevate your company and your leaders. One is our Growth Leaders Academy that will be kicking off early next year. And the second is our Goizueta Executive Women's Leadership Program You'll notice that we have an early bird registration offer available through December the 15th. You can also learn more information about both of these programs on our website. We hope that you will join us there. As we conclude today's session, as always, we have a short survey. We love hearing your input, especially what your 2 key takeaways are from today's session and other input we'd love to hear from you about. And as we close, we'd like to say, from our family to yours, happy Thanksgiving. Have a happy and safe holiday week next week. And we look forward to seeing you in December.